Larry Greenwald has a really interesting article in The Intercept about the hypocrisy of the Canadian government. And it can be applied in other contexts as well, but he really points out a terrific case of hypocrisy here in the case of Stephen Harper. First, he wants to point out, look, after the Charlie Hebdo shootings, the Prime Minister was very upset, as a lot of us were. He said, when a trio of hooded men struck at some of our most cherished democratic principles, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, they assaulted democracy everywhere. They have declared war on anybody who does not think and act exactly as they wish they would think and act. They have declared war on any country like ourselves that values freedom, openness, and tolerance. Well, now I agree with all that sentiment, and I'm really glad he said that. So, color me surprised to find out from the CBC this week that it turns out that they have a completely different standard when it comes to criticizing Israel in Canada. According to CBC News in Canada, quote, the Harper government is signaling its intention to use hate crime laws against Canadian advocacy groups that encourage boycotts of Israel. Wow. Now, wait a minute. There's nothing more political than saying let's boycott a country, any country, right? Whether it's Iran for what they've done, whether it's Israel, whether it's the US, Venezuela, you name it. Saying, hey, we think that if we do these particular kind of political actions, that it might move that country in a positive way in the opposite direction. In fact, there's a lot of Jews across the world who are participating in the boycott movement because they want to help Israel get to a better place. Nope. Now that's a hate crime, or could be a hate crime in Canada. That's a stunning piece of hypocrisy. So who might it be applying to? CBC explains further. Such a move could target a range of civil society organizations from the United Church of Canada and the Canadian Quakers to campus protest groups and labor unions. So if you want to criticize Islam, have at it, Hoss. You are a hero to Canada, right? You want to criticize the state of Israel? How dare you? Canadian Church and United Church of Canada, Quakers, student groups, labor groups? No, you're not allowed. Shut up. You see how much we value press freedom and freedom of expression in Canada? I'll give you more details. The government's intention was made clear in a response to inquiries from CBC News about statements by federal ministers of a, quote, zero tolerance approach to groups participating in a loose coalition called Boycott, Divest, and Sanction, which was begun in 2006 at the request of Palestinian non-governmental organizations. Now look, that movement, first of all, is a movement that is intended to be political and diplomatic. It is not what the Palestinians have done in the past. It does not resort to violence. It resorts to diplomacy. It resorts to economic action. And it resorts to try to find a political solution rather than a solution based on violence, strife, or war, right? Now, I know a lot of people in Israel and US and Canada don't like that movement. How dare you? Part of the reason they're so upset is because it could work. Now, they hate the comparison to South Africa, but South Africa is a decent comparison when you talk about boycotts. Now, when you did a movement in South Africa, they had a dispersed power movement because within the white community, there was democracy. There was some degree of power sharing. There was not a king. There was not a monarch or an absolute dictator or tyrant. Since a lot of people made money and they had a little bit more dispersed power, when you hurt all of their economic interests, well, then they were motivated to get rid of apartheid in their case. Now, in the case of Israel, for people inside Israel, there is a democracy. There is a more dispersed power base. So there's not one king or tyrant. So if you did a boycott movement, it has the potential of working. That's why people hate the boycott movement. But now for Canada to come in and say, I don't like your politics. So freedom of expression, I'm just kidding, man. No. You have freedom of expression to hate Muslims. But you don't have freedom of expression to express political dissent on the issue of Israel, which is holy and sacrosanct to us. Greenwald continues to make more good points about this. He says, has a Jazui BDS hashtag started trending yet on Twitter? How come there's no movement on that? Now, I know it's a story that not a lot of people talk about because the mainstream media is going to go, shh, we don't talk about criticism of Israel, okay? You want to criticize Muhammad? You want to draw pictures? great, we will celebrate you to the ends of the earth. In fact, Greenwald mentions that as well. He says, when the views being suppressed are ones that are amenable to those in power, e.g. cartoons mocking Islam, free speech is venerated. We get to celebrate ourselves as superior and progressive and victimized, and how good that feels. But when ideas are advocated that upset those in power, e.g. speech by Muslims critical of Western nations and their allies, the very same people acquiesce to or expressly endorse full-scale suppression. That is exactly right. And the Canadian government, in this case, is just simply being outrageous, hypocritical, and anyone with 2 bits of sense can tell you that this doesn't make any sense. And so it now vitiates, in retrospect, any positive things they said about the Charlie Hebdo shootings and how they were united in favor of freedom of expression. It turns out they didn't mean it at all.